Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome to the first Future Trends Forum recording of the new year 2025. And we begin with quite a bang up session. Our guest is the president of the Aspen Institute, Daniel Porterfield. And he's speaking about a book he's just published and one that he's worked on, it looks like, for quite a long time in his professional life. And it's about the growth mindset. And when I started hosting this, I thought that we'd be talking primarily about institutional growth, but his focus is actually on student growth, on how to change not just how students think about their own progress through post-secondary education, but also how college faculty and university staff support them in this. I found this session to be incredibly energetic, and Dan was a great guest. And as usual, the forum put to him wonderful questions. Well, here it comes. I hope you enjoy. And again, Happy New Year. Good time to start. Let me welcome everybody. Welcome to the Future Transform and Happy New Year to everybody. I'm glad to see you all here. We have a terrific guest who's doing some really, really impressive and exciting work. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation. For years now on the forum, we, as well as other people in higher education, have often been talking about higher education in negative ways, quite literally negative. That is, we're concerned about decreasing funding. We're very concerned about decreasing enrollment. We're worried about decreasing support for the humanities. We're worried about students' mental and physical health issues, and faculty and staff mental health issues. And this is all very sober. This is all very true. This is based on evidence and lived experience. But today's guest wants us to turn that around and wants us to think in a very productive, positive way in terms of a growth mindset. And he describes this in his new book in terms of how we think about teaching. And so this refers to both the student mindset, but also faculty and support staff and how they do that. Let me not just summarize the book. Let me actually introduce the author so he gets a chance to describe it. And he'll be up here for all of your questions. So to begin with, President Daniel Porterfield. Greetings, sir.
Hey, Brian, nice to see you. This is a really cool platform. Wow.
It is fun. It is fun. Where are you today, Daniel?
I am at the headquarters of the Aspen Institute, which is in Washington, D.C. But since I'm with you, I think I'm living in the future.
Well, let's see if we can help that come true. I'm glad you're just down the road from me. In fact, next time we'll have to come to your office and do this together.
Sounds great.
Yeah,
Thank you. Happy New Year, everybody. Let's get into it.
Indeed. Well, first of all, friends, if you haven't had a chance to read President Porterfield's book, the bottom left of the screen, you should see a kind of tan color button that says Mindset Matters. If you click that, that will take you to the Johns Hopkins University Press page where you can find out more about the book and grab a copy if you like. And I'd be remiss not to give a shout out to our mutual editor, Daniel. This is Greg Britton, the hardest working editor in the higher education universe. And we're both really grateful to write for him.
Yeah, thank you, Greg.
So let me just ask you a couple of basic questions, Dan, just to get things going. And by the way, would you prefer I call you Daniel, Dan, President Porterfield?
You can call me Dan.
Okay. And by the way, friends, just because Dan and I both have beards doesn't mean you have to have a beard to be on the program. A quick question to get things going. We're facing all kinds of challenges, or students are facing all kinds of challenges in higher education right now. I mentioned a couple of them in the introduction in terms of decreasing enrollment. Students often in polls and surveys express all kinds of anxieties about student debt, about their economic future, and in general, beyond higher education, the rising generation, the Generation Z, is just racked with all kinds of mental health challenges, anxieties about politics and climate change and so on. I'm curious, how can a growth mindset really help them in their higher education experience?
So let me take a second to explicate what is a growth mindset. And this idea has come out of the research of Carol Dweck from Stanford, incredibly eminent psychologist,
yes,
who over years of study identified that sometimes individuals are prone to have what she calls a fixed mindset, when confronted with a new opportunity to learn or to try something out. And the fixed mindset effectively is when we say to ourselves, I can't do that. I'm not good at that. Whatever that might be. Maybe it's Chinese. I'm not good at languages. Maybe it's dance. I'm too stilted. But whatever it is, the fixed mindset is the belief that our capabilities are intrinsically capped, and that a challenge that doesn't align to what we're good at is one that we're destined to fail at. Failure will then have terrible consequences. On the other hand, a growth mindset is the belief that confronted with a new opportunity, an invitation, we can say yes, believing that we have the capability to adapt ourselves, to grow our talent, if you will, to be able to develop, to meet the challenge. So the same student or the other student that with the opportunity to take Chinese doesn't say, I'm not good at languages. Those characters are too hard for me to figure out. My mouth won't make the sounds right. I'll get a B. I might get a C. It'll hold me back. That's the fixed mindset. The growth mindset says, I'm a learner. I can do this. I'll work hard. I'll probably be a little behind. I'll get at it. I'll go see the professor. I'll practice. I've done it before. I can do it again. I can grow. So take those two, if you will, mindsets or even worldviews. Which one is more valuable in general in a life that's going to throw curveballs and present incredible opportunities to try something new, and increasingly is going to require us to deal with change? The rate of change is growing so much faster in today's world. How we get information, where we get it, how we work, what it takes to work in the future. Everything is about our capacity to adapt. And so a growth mindset is an extraordinarily powerful thing to have anyway, but especially in a world defined by rapid change.
Indeed.
Some would say, well, college is so full of problems today. Everybody's making demands that college can't meet. And some say it's a woke ideology machine, and some say it's a hold people in place machine, and some say it's a pay for the party machine, and some say it's a no longer academically rigorous machine. Well, also, there may be elements of truth in those different critiques, but also millions of young people a year, or not so young people, are having college experiences that lead them to know, because they've done it, that they can grow again. And I don't want us to throw out that baby with the bathwater.
Excellent. Thank you very much for giving us an intro to Carol Dweck's concept. I just threw a link into the chat to one of her papers. I think you can find more examples of this.
Yeah, the book called Mindset is phenomenal. And I think I read it maybe, 15 years ago or 18 years ago. I was at Georgetown. I was a professor. I was also senior vice president for strategy. My wife and our 3 daughters lived in a dorm on Georgetown's campus. We were really immersed in the full Georgetown experience and loved it. And as I had been mentored and cultivated as an undergraduate in other ways, so I hope to in those times at Georgetown. And when I read Dweck's Mindset, I felt that she gave a vocabulary and a legitimacy to these ideas about investing in student learning and capacity that I had benefited from so much. It took a few more years to build into my life the set of experiences to be able to showcase, if you will, what it looks like to foster growth mindsets. But I really pay tribute to Carol Dweck and to all scholars who are able to create the new paradigms through which we can then better understand the world in which we live and the work we do.
Excellent. As someone who teaches at Georgetown, I'm glad to hear this connection. Let me just ask a quick second question then, and then I really want to turn this over to everybody in the audience for their questions. And their questions are already coming in, so I'll have to be quick. What are some of the ways that a university or college can best instill and support such paradigms, such ways of thinking, especially in terms of students and their own mindset, but also the faculty and staff who work with them?
So I think that there's a lot to say here, but a few fast points. One is, let's foster active learning, where the student is not simply reciting facts or information provided to them. Nothing wrong with that, but where some of the learning is the student generating her or his own ideas, her or his own discussion with others, where they're learning by doing. And teaching that moves from, if you will, the banking method, as Paulo Freire called it, to the problem-posing method is a good way to do that, to get students actively thinking and generating ideas, synthesizing, connecting, sharing, talking. In time, learning the fundamentals of research so they can go pursue questions no one's ever thought to ask, but them, in order to find answers no one's ever thought to look for. There's other ways to foster growth mindsets, though, of course, out of class, through mentoring relationships, to encourage mentorship that invests in each individual as a person both worthy of mentorship and able to benefit from it. That's a big part of facilitating growth mindset. Another thing that's important is holistic learning. We're growing through our academic learning, but through our collaborative work, through our mentorship, through our teamwork with others. We can grow through our jobs at school, through our residential communities. We can grow through the activities we lead. So helping to foster an environment where student action outside of class is valued for its learning potential, invested in, thought about, and prioritized for ways of facilitating learning that complements in the class learning. With faculty and others, I think it's important to show faculty the research of Carol Dweck and many others. Mary Murphy is a very important scholar in this area, who have shown that faculty attitudes towards student learning dramatically influences whether students believe they can learn. And one thing we see a lot is that when students opt out of a challenging opportunity, they often do it quickly. They do it because in a first class, or the first time they look in the lab and they don't know what the instruments are, or people use terms they haven't heard before. They think, I can't do this. And so inviting and encouraging students to stick with it, to give it a try, to stay in it. I would argue that grades are important, but can be de-emphasized in order to facilitate learning, and more exposure, I think, is also very valuable. And I guess I want to say finally, as just a big point about a growth mindset. Sometimes people say, well, growth mindsets happen when you tell people, you exhort them. You say, you can do it, you can do it. And that's good, but only to a point. I actually think that growth mindsets emerge over time when A, we learn, we grow.
Right.
B, we know we've learned. So we didn't just learn, but we knew we learned. And then the next step, we know how to learn. We know we've learned, we know how to learn. And then that's when I am a learner becomes a part of identity. I've grown, I know I've grown, I know how to grow, I'm a grower. My book, I trace the stories of maybe 35 or 40 students from Franklin and Marshall who I knew well, and with their permission, show how they came to discover, to create, to collaborate, to mentor, or to strive following that paradigm. They did it, they know they did it, they know they could do it again, it became a part of identity.
Excellent. Excellent. And this is so everyone who's on our email list, you received President Porterfield's biography, which includes, among other things, not just teaching and administering at Georgetown, but also being president of Franklin and Marshall, liberal arts college. That's a fantastic background. And Dan, thank you for that extensive answer. I think you just described a wonderful campus environment. But before I say anything more, let me turn this over to people who have questions. And again, if you're new to the forum, friends, remember that you can fire a question in the chat, but also you can use that Q&A box on the very bottom of the screen. So just click that question mark. And if you want to join us on stage, just click the raised hand and you can ask a question out loud. We have a question here from, and I'm going to please, Christina, I'm going to try and get your last name correctly. Setzikorn. Christina Setzikorn at Purdue Global asks this question here about adult learners. What could be done to foster or instill a growth mindset in an adult with a set mindset? And then a separate question is, what could be done to encourage a growth mindset in children? So adults.
If I can answer those two questions plus the college age, that's it. I'm like the new Aristotle or something.
You've covered it all.
I think that with adults, it's incredibly worth the time to help colleagues, if you're in a work context, or adult students, or family members, have the experience of learning, and then to challenge them, having learned, to explain what they learned and how they learned. So this is sometimes called metacognition, where you step out of the experience to describe the experience as if you're observing it. And so building work environments where colleagues are trying new skills, are then assessing how they're doing at it, and then if they're mastering them or improving upon them, being able to explicate to one another how they've done it. I've been doing a lot of workshops with like both educational teams and some company teams around this book. And there's a short version of the book that's in Fast Company that just says the 5 mindsets and gives examples of each. And I sort of recommend the Cliff Notes to you all. But as a tool, one thing we'll do is go around the room and ask the adults around the room, do you see yourself in one of these growth mindsets, and how did you develop it? And so being reflective about learning is to developing a growth mindset, reflective and then intentional. With children, I beyond my depth here, except to say I'm a parent. And so, one of the things that my wife and I always try to do is to help our children have the balance of social and emotional learning that complements academic learning. It's like a three-legged stool to foster hopefully healthful relationships with their peers and with their teachers, to care about their learning and to be active with them as we were trying to help them experience learning as something you do actively rather than passively or by rote. But I want to be careful about being a know-it-all here when I don't know that much.
Well, that brings us not to Aristotle, but to Socrates. That's, first of all, Christina, thank you for the excellent question. And,
one thing I want to say is with in earlier parts of my life, I coached a lot of basketball in Baltimore City, and my teams were city teams. This was in the 70s and early 80s. They comprised white and African American students. We played in all white leagues and all black leagues. Our teams were different. And that idea of difference, we're different. What do we do? What are we about? Is really important to identity formation, and also to this sense, I do something different. I can go a little farther. I can do a little more. I love coaching because you're building skill upon skill upon skill. If you want to teach a right-handed student to make a layup left-handed, there's about 7 steps. Take it one at a time. They build on each other. In 2 weeks, they'll be running on a court making a left-handed layup. Teach a team to break a press. At first, they won't be able to. They'll be flustered. They'll be overwhelmed. You show them the fundamentals of how to deal with a full court press. 2 weeks' time, they're breaking that press and getting easy shots on the other end of the floor. I worked with recently arrived immigrant families from El Salvador when I was right after college. I also taught in prison at Lorton Reformatory right after college. And I worked with court supervised youth throughout college. In each of those cases, there were significant barriers to learning and growth. Extraordinary. And in each case, investing in the agency of the individual learner, in that person's belief that they have capability to handle their circumstances, that they have value and are worth my time and others' time, is so important. The adult men that I taught at Lorton Reformatory, who were probably in their 40s, I was in my 20s, they were the best students I ever taught in a institution, in a university bent on their destruction.
Yeah.
Because they themselves took responsibility for their education and believed if they worked at it, they would learn, and that gave it meaning for them. I was their partner in learning, I wasn't teaching them. I was structuring the learning experience so that they could lead their own learning.
And then they go through the same process of becoming aware of when they learned and how they learned?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing that was, like the driving home from Lorton Reformatory once a week, the biggest takeaway was the incredible moral beauty of an individual despite their circumstances, saying, I have it within me to make something of my life and to develop my mind and my capability. I'm more than my surroundings. So to me, it was a very short leap to move from working with Salvadoran immigrant teenagers or adults incarcerated at Lorton Reformatory and the Maryland House of Corrections to teaching college students. It's the same fundamental process. There's more barriers, of course, with those that are objectively oppressed or marginalized. Well, what's your message to that group? You're oppressed? How's that going to help them?
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I have questions I want to ask, but questions are coming in from all directions, Dan. So I want to give people more chances to respond.
Sure thing.
Natalie from the Library of Congress. So again, this is a very DC-centric conversation so far. She asks this: these experiences, those that foster a growth mindset, are not easy to measure via typical data metrics. What can we look to instead to understand if an academic institution promotes growth mindsets?
That's a really good question. I don't want to give up that some developmental learning that's not currently measured in the systems we have today could be measured. But I think you all know more about that than I do. I just know I've got this Apple Watch on. And for some reason, it's important to me to close these 3 rings every day and to try to close them every week and to try to get a little badge for doing something special the day a badge is given out for mindfulness or for working out for 25 minutes. So I want to believe that we could invent some ways to capture and document growth in such a way that it would motivate people to want more growth. That's the key to this. It's not the capturing, it's the motivating. Maybe that it's male jewelry or something in my case also. So, okay, so that's one idea. Another idea, a different one, and again, forgive me because this isn't going to sound as rigorous probably as some of the work that you all do is, but there's a long tradition of explicating meaning through other forms of scholarship than, if you will, econometrics, the measuring of things. So, for example, anthropology, or memoir, or journalism. And so I wonder also if there's not a place for self-description or the explication of others' learning based on observation, participant observation, if you will, to count, to documenting the reality of the steady, if almost imperceptible growth of agency that leads us to believe that we can drive our own development. Because that's gold when people believe they can drive their own development. It's absolute gold. That's what we want for our children. We want that sense of personal and intellectual independence and freedom. So that's why I wrote this book, because precisely because of the question that you asked, I wanted to use the tools I have to document and demonstrate so that others could see it in their campuses or in their lives, what the development of growth mindsets looks like in the students that I was close to.
Well, first of all, Natalie, that's a great question. And Dan, not only is that a great answer, but you spurred some interesting reactions in the chat. Our good friend in the Pacific Northwest, Mark Colbert Wilson, recommends e-portfolios because they support reflection and are a high impact practice, and he has a good link to that.
Thank you.
And then Kristen Eshelman offers Kristen, you're gonna have to write this out for me because I always mispronounce this. There's a interesting tool for measuring ethnography at scale, and I think it's pronounced Carnarvon, but I always get it wrong. It's Welsh, and I struggle with Welsh. So, Kristen, if I brutalize that, please let me know in the chat. But she has a link there to a really good page on that. We have a follow-up question for this, which comes from Seth Fury. And Seth writes, he's coaching a recent graduate who's the first in her extended family to get a college education. Her relatives are trying to put her down and hold her back. What have you learned are the special needs of first-generation students?
So there's of course, as with all students, as with second-generation students, third-generation students, there's a wide array of gifts and talents and needs and assets. I want to be careful about saying something that's glib. In the stories that I tell, there are some students whose families were not supportive of their learning journey. And in the introduction of the book, I tell the story about one student who it's a pseudonym, the family was migrants from West Africa. And the father came first and brought his daughter when she was about 13 or 14. She had to learn English. He really wanted her to get school to go back and marry one of his friends who was his age. And she came to understand that. And for her, the journey of an education was to constantly negotiate for the chance to prolong her learning until she was able to determine the course of her life. And so she went to this good charter school in New York City. Her father let her go to Franklin and Marshall. We had a big financial aid program I could talk about another time. So we fully funded her financial aid and met every student's full need. And for 4 years, she was a superb, spectacular achiever on our campus. And at the same time, hid that from her father. Did not let him know. She believed he would have taken that as a rebuke. It would have offended his sensibility. He would have said, "You think you're better than us. You're losing us."
Yeah.
She had to really negotiate. It wasn't one thing. It was a constant negotiation. It was strategy, like multi-dimensional chess to manage everything, vacations and staying on campus and being an RA, and so much of what she did. She won a big award at graduation. She won a big fellowship. None of that was meaningful to him. But she prolonged the day of being sent back until he couldn't do that anymore. Another student, thinking of a rural student from central Pennsylvania, his family believed that if he walked through that door of college, he would never come back. And in his case too, because he wanted to preserve a relationship, one of the things he was with his parents, even as he was changing and growing, and later he came out after college, one of the ways he did that was by, as the first student, finding mentors and supporters that knew that he was living as a bridge person with a foot in two worlds. They knew what he was experiencing. They were responsive to it. They respected it. Both these students I'm mentioning were highly respected as human beings by faculty, who I write about in the book. And so to support first-gen students now, to come back to what you're saying, there are many things that we can do, but most important is to build authentic relationships, to get to know students in their own distinction, their own circumstance. Not to say every first-generation student is exactly this way or that way. Now, one great thing that happened at F&M, because we tripled our financial aid budget, and we eliminated what's called merit aid and made everything need-based, and then committed to meeting every student's full financial aid. And it was a collective effort. The faculty, the board, they went with this approach. As a result, our student body, we tripled the number of Pell Grant students, we tripled rural, we tripled immigrant, we tripled African American, everything tripled, Latino, everything tripled or almost tripled. And as a result of that happening, the school became much stronger, many more engaged students,
Mm.
a powerful, palpable sense of aspiration all over campus. I make that point to say we also, in our care for any student who might feel they don't belong, and any student who's struggling, any student who feels that their class or their identity is not represented, we also want to make sure we're challenging them and supporting them to contribute as an asset, because that's ultimately what all students are, a collection of assets. And having an asset-based approach means sometimes we don't label people anything except a collection of talents. Be careful about labeling. We had a couple students who I write about who experienced the feeling of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Understandable. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
One's name is Charisma. She's written about in the chapter on discovery. And Charisma ultimately drew on lessons both from her professor, one in particular, early, and from an aunt. Both. The aunt, or the professor, it was, she's from Newark, and she experienced many hardships. The professor taught her, your life can be thought about. Your life can be studied. So the factors that have influenced your community, those can be studied. They can be looked at. You can analyze them. Develop your mind for that if you feel called. That you'll be right at home here. You're not the imposter. You'll be living the full spirit of the school. Claim it. If somebody else makes you feel unwelcome, don't give them that power. Claim it. Go deep with your studies. You'll see how it pays off. Charisma's just finished her MA in public policy. She's off to law school now. But her aunt taught her something else. She was feeling imposter syndrome. She was thinking, maybe I should get out of here. Maybe I should try someplace else. First year. Her aunt, who didn't go to college, who cared for her after her parents passed away, her aunt said, you can't outrun the things that scare you. And so it was that combination of a professor that showed her the pathway to feeling belonging was to lean into opportunity, and an aunt who said, why do you think you'll escape the feelings you have in a different place? That together, those assets gave her the fortitude she needed, the perspective she needed to then make college her own, and she's been thriving ever since. So I love the question about first-gen college goers and first-gen college learners. My mom was a first-gen college goer going to night school in Baltimore at Towson University in the 70s. I know the power of an education for people that whose families have not historically had that. And we've got to encourage them and support them, make the changes that are needed, but also challenge them to be the agents of their own, the authors of their own education.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for that rich and passionate answer. That's just fantastic. In the chat, Tracy Selector responds quickly by saying, this has a lot in common with Peter Felton's work on relationship-rich education.
Yeah, it does. I was just talking to Peter not too long ago because he's working on a next book. And that was one of the books that I read when I was trying to ground my intuitive ideas in scholarship. The work that he and Leo Lambert did, which really documents how at Elon College, they were able to look at the power of learning opportunities for students who felt they had strong relationships. And now, of course, we know that, I said this before, but that social and emotional learning is crucial to academic learning. And in fact, students with a fractured social or emotional base may have difficulty piling lots of academic learning atop that until they fortify that base, which is one of the most beautiful things that colleges can do, is by giving students access to peer counseling, to counseling centers, to learning that's related to social and emotional development, to relationships and friendships that are validating and sort of call students to become what they can be. We can help students to shore up areas of weakness or vulnerability that sometimes highly motivated students will deny through high school, thinking I can either power through this and never deal with it, or I'll wait till later. I really value so much of the work that happens on college campuses that's around helping students get in touch with and learn they can control the emotional burners that make them up.
That's very powerful, and we've had in the chat folks like our good friends Roxanne Riskin and Lisa Durf saying yes, that this is crucial, that this emotional and social learning is essential. We've got more questions coming in, Dan, so you've clearly hit a nerve here, which is great. Doctor, please forgive me if I mispronounce this. Vigani Demike from Edinburgh says, or asks, from your research, are there special personal behaviors or characteristics that inhibit someone from embracing a growth mindset?
Okay, that's a great question. And I'm speaking intuitively here. One is a combination of high expectation with low engagement. A second one is the absence of, or the lesser resilience, because resilience is a powerful factor in dealing with the disappointments that are the cobblestones of the journey to growth. A third one is not having a vision of why you're in college to begin with. Because if you're there because you're there, you are probably more at risk of not maximizing the opportunity. I don't want to, that's probably too much. I'm sure plenty of people figure out why they're there while they're there. But if I look back at the first gen students at Franklin and Marshall College, they had resilience, times 10. They had said yes to opportunities in their upbringing and their schools, even if there weren't a lot of them. They said yes to opportunity. And above all, they had a vision for why they should sacrifice and inconvenience themselves and maybe lose touch with some peers in pursuit of learning. So there's a few thoughts.
Good thoughts. Thank you for the really good question. We have a series of questions coming up, Dan, that are approaching this from similar angles. So I think you see what I mean. One is from our great friend Joey King, another one of Greg Britton's stable of authors. And he asks, what about overly supportive parents? As a former college president and current boarding school president, I find that supportive parents can be stifling as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Joey, thank you for the email the other day too. And your work with Brian Mitchell is work I've read and really appreciate. And only now I'm making the connection to the great one, to Greg Britton. So how amazing. Talk about a growth mindset, by the way. An editor and a publisher believing that you have something to say is incredibly powerful. Yes, there was for a while a bit of an industry of books about the coddling of American young, and helicopter parents, and I don't think there's I think we're doing our students a service if we protect them from desirable difficulties and setbacks, desirable ones, because they fortify you, they teach you, they challenge you, they help you believe you can work, you can grow, you can meet a challenge, and so sometimes I think it's possible for caring and loving parents to smother our children and to essentially hold them back. And it's difficult to be a parent and see your child in pain. They're upset. They're wishing they had done better. So I think trying to always show love that's based on who they are and not what they do or what they achieve is important. But the truth of the matter is that parenting is an incredible journey, and I'm hesitant to criticize any other parent. But I think that schools can support parents by helping parents learn even better that the learning journey will be richer
Mm-hmm.
if it involves student agency themselves, students acting themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. It's a really good question, and Daniel, I'm seeing themes start to appear that are really clear and useful here. Let's turn this to the faculty side. A wonderful former guest and just an overall wonderful person, founder of Art Store and author of a really, really powerful book, James Schulman. He asks about how to support faculty. Do we reward faculty members for risk-taking and growth mindsets that they can convey to their students?
Yeah.
Or are they rewarded for sticking to the straight and narrow path?
Yeah. So I think it depends on the school and the culture of faculty engagement with students, because certainly at Franklin and Marshall, where I was president, I saw just inspiring cases, like by the dozens, the majority of the faculty easily committed to investing in student learning. And this book has 35 stories, 30 of them, faculty members are embedded in the story of a student's learning. In fact, one reason why I wrote the book with such care to emphasize the different ways that faculty prompted or spurred growth mindsets was I wanted to show that there's amazing faculty out there,
Mm-hmm.
and like somebody's got to stand up and say enough bashing of the faculty and of intellectuals, and look based on real experience at how the construction of a class, the dealing with student need, the supporting student learning outside of class, the building of research opportunities, the participating in extracurricular activities together as mentors, writing of letters of recommendations, challenging students to compete for opportunities and coach them along the way, that this is happening all over campuses. And I don't know that it can all be rewarded, but I do think that it also can be called out and recognized as perhaps more of a norm and less of an exception than we sometimes say. Now, I know I was at Franklin and Marshall College, smaller faculty, but they were very high achieving in terms of the scholarship, and I awarded tenure based on scholarship, teaching, and service in school. So that's one thing. I think that one thing we did was the Mellon Foundation gave me, as a new president, a small grant, which they give to new presidents of liberal arts colleges. And I was able to use mine with faculty to build a process for our faculty to go research pedagogy centers around the country, so that we could create one so they could create one with me, but they were the leaders of it at F&M. And that was a fabulous outcome of that Mellon grant, when we were able to create a faculty center that gave faculty a place, if you will, to share experiences of mentorship and teaching and scholarship, to work a little bit together on how to respond to the changing demographic of the student body as more students from low-income communities and from more far-flung places in central Pennsylvania came to the school. So a little bit like I talked about first-gen students as a collection of assets and talent and capabilities, be careful about sizing them up. I sort of want to say the same thing about faculty members. Is the tenure system the only way to recognize academic and intellectual and pedagogical excellence? No, of course not. And there may be experiments at some of the institutions here about faculty working in other adjacent kinds of roles that either are combined with other kinds of learning responsibilities or administrative responsibilities or full-time adjunct. All models should be encouraged, and maybe even more faculty recruited and compensated better who are not on tenure lines, but who are focused heavily on student learning would be a good thing.
Well, this is, by the way, I just should mention that you've been getting a steady current of praise for your work at F&M. Janet Rapelye, I believe, if I got that right, said you were great there. And Lisa Durf mentions her aunt, Jean Buckley, always said the best things about F&M. I think she was a trustee or something.
Franklin and Marshall is an excellent school. It's exemplary, but it's also representative, because all across the country, on thousands of college campuses, there are serious people investing their time in facilitating student learning and building relationships that matter and will be taken by the millions of students that graduate from our schools into their adult lives as a resource they will draw upon again and again. And that is the part of the story of American higher education that almost no one is telling. And I think it has to do with, of course, self-appointed critics, real problems, and then a bit of almost like a insecurity from those that believe in what we do. And I think we have to take our case to students and to the larger society, be willing to make changes to invest in even more impactful student learning, but also not back down from the challenge of defending what we're about.
Well, let's see if we can help make that case here. We have a video question from our excellent friend in Maryland, Steve Ehrman, also previous guest and a great thinker and writer. So let me just bring Steve up on stage. Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you?
Great. Good to see you.
My question has to do with faculty and your remarks just a bit ago about them. There are some faculty, and because there are some people who believe that students' minds are fixed in their abilities.
Yeah.
So they have a fixed expectation of students. How malleable did that turn out to be? That faculty mindset turn out to be at Franklin Marshall? Did faculty change? And if so, was it a pretty easy thing, or involving large numbers of faculty, or just a few at the margins?
Ooh, what a great question. So let me take a shot at this. When I started at Franklin and Marshall in 2011, I did this big listening tour. Went to all every academic department, everything, registrar, dining hall, student life, athletics, met with everybody, went to feeder schools to hear how they saw F&M. It was crazy. It was quite structured. I was really 3 or 4 a day. And I heard, especially from the faculty, 2 or 3 things that were kind of truisms to the group. One was they really wanted students that wanted to go the distance. They wanted the best students. And secondly, they really believed that there was a subset of students at F&M that were not bought in. And the third thing was they wanted a more diverse student body, but they felt the school would be bad for students from underrepresented backgrounds because it had not been good at that. And they thought it wouldn't be good at it. And they were worried that its rigor would be almost counterproductive, that students might end up with debt but no degree, with an embittered and frustrated experience. And I want to share this with absolutely no judgment whatsoever. No judgment for what were the collective thoughts here. And one of the things I'd had experience with at Georgetown was working on Georgetown's approach to building a more inclusive student body. It was a school that had dedicated almost every available dollar to financial aid. And so in listening to all this, I said to some faculty in different combinations, if we're able to grow our aid budget, we're going to be recruiting from 90% of the country, because only 7% of the country can pay the full cost of tuition without any financial aid. Do you think we can find motivated and hardworking, talented students, especially ones that have the resilience to deal with some setbacks from that 90%? And faculty said, it really did, said, give it a try, let's see. But I think we were being watched those first couple of years because the faculty didn't have the experience yet of success with this kind of strategy, which we did not think of as a diversity strategy, but rather as a talent strategy, because the talent was for hard work, resilience, saying yes to opportunity, and a vision of why education matters. We looked for students with those qualities and good grades in a college prep curriculum, because they had to be able to do they had to have a foundation to do it academically. There's so many students like that around the country in every zip code. They're not being recruited by the Ivy League. They're everywhere. So now you look at community colleges, you could double the number. There's 50,000 top students a year graduating from community colleges with a 3.5 or higher GPA who don't even go to another college. There's so much talent out there. So over the first year or two, faculty in different ways were watching. We ended up looking very closely at the grades of all students, semester by semester. It turned out the Pell Grant students had the same grades as the student body as a whole collectively. The transfer rate was lower, as it turned out, for the Pell Grant students. But the big thing was that faculty felt the investment. This one professor, Joe Thompson in biology, says to me, I used to have these kids coming into me saying they want me to raise their grade. Now they're coming in saying, how can I learn more? It was fantastic. And so why isn't an aspiration to learn thought of as a talent? Think about it. What's the job of a student? To learn. Who's got the emotional readiness, the intellectual drive, the lived experience of learning? So anyway, it's hard to finance higher education. What is not hard to do is find talent. Talent is everywhere. So what I loved about the way the faculty responded is it wasn't a matter of blind faith. Whatever you say, Porterfield, change the student body. It was much more participation, assessment, but engagement. And I remember at the, one of the professors who'd been very skeptical went to one of my board members and said, not to me, but because she had taught him, I don't think this is going to work. And I didn't condemn her. And a couple of years later, she was one of the ones working on a whole approach to writing across the curriculum. And she thought would really help students. So we shouldn't label or give up on anybody, is what I'm saying here. And I do respect that if faculty think students are being harmed by any strategy, they should speak up. So there's a few thoughts.
Thanks.
Steve has a genius for asking the good questions. And Dan, I love this answer. We're almost out of time, and we have a question that I think is a powerful one that takes us in a new direction. And so if we want to circle back another time, please let me know about this. This is from our dear friend in Connecticut, Roxanne Riskin, and she asks this: how will AI be helpful with cultivating the growth mindset?
Yeah, it's like, technology is, it's good or ill. A mingled yarn. We'll see. I think it potentially could be quite valuable to help students sequence learning. But I am skeptical that students will have the benefits of sequenced learning without the presence of caring and expert teachers, professors, mentors, guiding the learning journey and helping them draw meaning from what they're learning. So I think it's promising, as it also could be quite detrimental, of course. I think that one of the dangers is that students will come to believe that the securing knowledge is a matter of asking AI what the answer is, as opposed to developing their own inbuilt capacity as discoverers, as creators. And so, it remains to be seen how educators use AI so that it bolsters student agency as opposed to detracting from it.
That's a tricky one. In the chat, Tom Hems observes that AI should teach us to question, not answer.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. And I think that we have to engage this technology as educators, as opposed to thinking that somehow it's not going to be relevant to the future, because it obviously will be. So can we use it in the service of HI, of human intelligence and of human agency?
That's a really great way to end this, I think, because I'm afraid it is actually the top of the hour again. And that means we have to let you go back to your extraordinarily busy schedule.
Well, thank you. It's fun to be here. And by the way, if you ever want to do another focus, my colleague Josh Weiner leads the Aspen Institute's College Excellence Program, which is a spectacular set of activities focusing primarily on community college excellence and how we as a society can drive great progress for working class, first generation students, local regional students by investing in community college's success. I would love to have him with you in this group.
Please put me in touch. You've been a fantastic guest, and I mean you're truly inspiring based on an extraordinary career. Friends, I recommend the book. Again, if you haven't had a chance to grab a copy, there's a button to it on the bottom left of the screen. Dan, what's the best way to keep up with you and to follow your work? Should we just go to the
feel free, if anybody wants to, feel free to email me at daniel.porterfield@Aspen Institute, one big word, .org, not edu. Most of you are edus. And that's as good a way as any. And I also need to learn more from what you're doing. So I hope that links to those links that you were putting together, Brian, from the group, there's a couple of those I definitely want to learn from as well, including but not limited to this whole idea of e-portfolios. There's a possible AI application that might be quite beneficial, depending how used.
Good point. Very good point. Thank you, and I'll share that with you right after this.
All right.
Please take care. Happy New Year, and thanks again. We'll be in touch.
All right. See you on Blue Sky. I love it.
Indeed. Take care.
Bye-bye.
And don't go away yet, friends. Just let me thank you for the brilliant questions. A great conversation. If you'd like to keep up with this conversation, you can do it across the social media platforms here. You can find me on Twitter, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Threads, and Blue Sky, as well as, of course, the blog. If you'd like to go into our previous recordings where we discuss various issues of how to support students, you can find our archive at tinyurl.com/FDF-archive. If you'd like to look into our upcoming sessions, which do mention AI, as well as grading, as well as the future, as well as higher education's health and student health, just go to the forum website, forum.futureofeducation.us. Thank you all again for being with us today. It's a great, terrific way to start the new year. Hope everybody's well. Those of you who are in the north of the Northern Hemisphere, I hope you're staying warm and dry. Thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you next time online. Take care. Bye-bye.